I'm Adrienne Giffen, and this is Now You're Talking. Parenting in the digital world can feel overwhelming, especially when you're balancing a career, raising teens and preteens, and trying to keep up with it all. Screens are constant, and sometimes real connection feels out of reach. This podcast is your chance to pause and breathe, a space for stories and insights that bring encouragement, perspective, and the reminder that you are not alone. Today's conversation is one so many parents will recognize, especially those trying to raise thoughtful, resilient kids while navigating careers, technology, and the unexpected turns life can take. I'm joined by Sam St. Clair, a parent, entrepreneur, real estate professional, and photographer who shares his deep personal journey of balancing family and work while stepping into parenthood in a way he never planned, through the adoption of his niece and nephew. In this episode, Sam opens up about the realities of parenting in a tech-driven world, what it takes to build resilience in children, and why consistency, communication, and example matter more than getting it right. We talk about work-life balance, entrepreneurship with purpose, and how the small, everyday decisions we make as parents quietly shape the people our kids become. If you're raising kids, building a career, or trying to do both without losing yourself or your family along the way, this conversation will meet you right where you are. Let the conversations begin. Sam, very nice meeting you, and thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to hearing how you are managing it all with an 8-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a growing and evolving career. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. It's so nice to finally meet you. I know we've been talking back and forth, so it's good to finally be on here.
Yeah, well, that's great. So how are you? You have a 16-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter who are very active. Yeah. And an evolving career in real estate. Now you're changing direction again. So how are you keeping it all together in this digital world?
Yeah, I think one step at a time is kind of the key there. Yeah. At work, we always say that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So I try to just take everything in stride. I mean, technology is unavoidable and it's just part of life. So I think the more we learn to use it to our advantage and to support our goals, the better it serves us. I mean, professionally, it's great for networking, for advertising, for establishing an online presence and credibility. And then on a personal level, your children are going to use technology and you have to teach them to navigate the world and develop the life skills that they need to be successful. So you can't keep them from it. You just have to teach them to use it responsibly and put some guardrails up every once in a while. Yeah.
And you have this special situation where 3 years ago you adopted your niece and nephew. And prior to that, you weren't a parent. So what was that like? Because that has a whole nother level of complexity that I find even hard to imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely culture shock.
Yes.
They weren't newborn babies at the time. They were 12 and 12.
Yes. 12 and 4.
Yeah. One's a boy, one's a girl. The boy's 12. Yes. Well, she was 4, and they could not be more different from each other.
Yes.
But I had a lot of fear of the unknown. And, I was researching parenting techniques and how to handle this, that, or the other. And the fact of the matter was that there were so few parents that fell into our exact situation. And I'm sure that's true with a lot of families. So yes. We just had to figure it out. The thing that surprised me the most after we got the kids was how much they were able to handle on their own.
Really?
And we just found that as long as we showed up and kept our word and were consistently there when we said we would be, that they would handle a lot of the day-to-day and the small stuff. And it turned out to be way less of a big deal than I thought. Still with its challenges, but not as not as monumental as I first thought it would be.
Wow. And how have you evolved through this process? I mean, you had to completely change probably your whole perspective.
Yeah. You definitely stop thinking all about yourself and start thinking more about your family as a whole and about your kids. But I don't know if I've told you, but in a previous life, I used to be a Marine, and the Marines have these leadership principles that they teach you. And one of them says, set the example. And with my kids, I think that's been the most impactful change in my life. When you have an ugly habit or an ugly tendency and you see it repeated in your kids, you feel, worse than you've ever felt in your life. And so you have to change and adapt and evolve and become better because they see it. They see you 24/7. And so I just try to focus on setting the example and letting them emulate the best possible version of me that they can. But man, it's, I'm not perfect. Nobody is. And they make it abundantly clear.
And we're all works in progress at any age. And for you to be that self-aware, to even be able to sort of see that and see how your kids are seeing you, or at least have an idea, that's a big first step, I would imagine. And what's it like? So you're dealing with a 16-year-old son and I think an 8-year-old daughter. And what's that like managing the two genders, or is there a difference in this digital era?
Well, there's a huge difference, especially because, when you get at the time, a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old, they came from circumstances that weren't as sheltered as a lot of parents would like their children to be. Mm-hmm. And so my 12-year-old had seen just about everything and done just about everything. And, the genie was out of the bottle. And then the 4-year-old was 4 and she hadn't, experienced as much. So there is this element of needing to put different rules or approaches or systems in place for each kid. Because maybe a lot of parents with a 12-year-old would want to filter the music that they listen to or the TV that they watch and stuff. And I knew I couldn't put that back in the bottle, and it wouldn't serve me well to try to control him like that. And I had to let those things go, but you have to shelter the younger child from it. And I think getting my oldest on board was the most helpful part. And he has always looked out for his little sister. So he's always
okay.
But man, when you talk about boys and girls, he is the most stereotypical boy that you can imagine. He was an all-star running back, always wants to shadow box or wrestle with me or go ride his bike and do wheelies and all that. And then, she does gymnastics and wants to do her makeup and, wants to play with unicorns, and they just could not be, more different. But I think it might not be popular these days. It certainly wasn't when I was kind of going through my teenage years, to say that I think children do need a mother and a father present in their life. But having my wife set the example for my daughter and me set the example for my son, and then our marriage set the example for how they should treat one another, I think has been more powerful than I knew it would be before we had. I grew up and I adjusted pretty well, even though I had a single mom and my dad wasn't around. Seeing the difference that it made in their lives, just having a good marriage to look at, I think needs to be talked about more, because they both just imprint off of one of us or the other.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They watch us and notice things that we don't even notice ourselves. It always reminds me of our pets. They watch our every move. But so do our kids.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your children are really resilient, and it sounds like you are too, because you had to be resilient growing up. Where do you think that resilience comes from, and how can, as parents, how can we help our children to become increasingly resilient so they can navigate life on their own?
Yeah, I think when you're faced with adversity, you always find yourself in this position where you get to make a decision on how you feel about it. You can sit there and wallow in self-pity, or you can laugh and you can have fun and you can figure out, a positive outcome that can come from whatever it is you're facing. And you're going to live this life no matter what. So you can live it with a good attitude or a bad attitude, and you can be the hero of your own story, or you can be a victim. And I would rather live my life having fun, having a laugh, having a good attitude, and not waste time kind of just being woe is me about anything.
Yes.
And with your kids, it's natural to want to pick them up when they're down and give them a hug, and all those things are important. But sometimes, especially with the younger ones, it can be a little more clear. You'll watch it with 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they learn quickly that if they cry and they make a situation a little more dramatic than it needs to be, that they can get attention sometimes. And so they learn that is maybe the best way for them to get attention. And I think finding that balance of, let me pick you up because you fell, let me give you a hug, and then let me tell you that you need to breathe and be tough and smile, and it's not that bad. I think that's important. And then as they get older, especially into those teenage years, making them accountable for their actions is huge. If they wrong somebody, they need to go apologize. They need to, work it off or do, something to make it right, I think is important. But they're also just naturally pretty resilient kids on their own. Both are stubborn and tough.
Who taught you to be the hero of your own story?
I think just the circumstances in life. When I was around the same age I got my son, around 12, is when my parents split up and my dad kind of, left the picture. And at the time, he had made some career choices and moved the family to a bit of a fixer-upper house in Missouri. And we were on 3 acres surrounded by 6 other acres, and our driveway was about 600 feet long uphill. And when he left, it was just my mom, who worked full-time, 45 minutes to an hour away downtown. And, it snows in Missouri and trees fall across the driveway and the house breaks and stuff. And so you find yourself 12, 13 years old, shoveling a 600-foot driveway by hand, or, parenting your little brother, stuff like that. And I just had to learn to be independent and learn to be a contributing member of the family, because focusing on myself and my problems didn't serve my mom, it didn't serve my brother, and it certainly didn't serve me.
Yeah.
So I think just learning to make the most of whatever life has given you, and it's built that resiliency.
Well, as you're talking and after reading your bio and researching, and it talked about, your bio talks about you buying fixer-uppers and flipping them. You've had a real estate career.
Yeah.
How connected is your past being in Missouri, shoveling and getting a fixer-upper how is that connected to who you are today?
I think it's very connected. My grandfather was kind of my stand-in male role model, and he was a Missouri State Highway patrolman, but on his off days and his off time, he would always make himself of service to his neighbors, or he would go learn a trade from a friend of his. So he apprenticed under a master electrician, and he learned carpentry, and he made all his own furniture, and it's all beautiful heirloom quality stuff. And so just looking up to him and learning to be self-sufficient and do things myself, I think went a long way, at least in terms of the attitude of, hey, I could do that. Even if I don't know how to do it, I could do that. And you brought up technology earlier.
Yes.
Now with, my generation and below, there's no excuse not to know something. It's at our fingertips. You can Google it, you can YouTube it. And so when we bought that first fixer in Yuma, I learned everything either from my grandfather or through YouTube, and just kept myself organized and fixed the house that way. But in addition to that, I think choosing the right life partner was key. My wife is a Marine as well, and also comes from an even crazier family background than mine. Mine's very tame. So picking somebody that was willing to take a big risk like that and to buy a house sight unseen from Japan and buy it on almost no money, it takes a special kind of spouse to do that.
Yes. Yeah. If you think of Justina's values and your values, how are they aligned?
Aligned in pretty much every way. Yeah, taking personal responsibility for everything, holding each other accountable, being kind, working hard. Those are things. At the time, it was kind of a paperwork headache, but when we got married, the Marine Corps made us attend a premarital workshop. And we went into it like, really? This is dumb. I have to just check this box, but it forced us about the important issues that a lot of couples don't address until after the fact. And then they find out that they're not compatible in some way, whether it's politically, religiously, financially.
Mm-hmm.
And we were forced very early on to get on the same page and have those conversations. And I think figuring out quickly where we were aligned and where we weren't, and then making a decision to align one way or the other was critical, because those things are stressors in your marriage. And if you don't talk about it before you're married, it rears its head later.
Yes. And then how does that then, and thinking about other parents who may be listening to this, how does that then, your value system and your alignment, then impact who you are as parents?
It's a great question. Parents need to be aligned in front of the children at all times, or the children will start to play these mommy-daddy games as we...
They're brilliant, aren't they? Yes, yeah.
Cunning.
So brilliant. Yeah, cunning, yes, for sure.
Every time they do stuff like that, I'm like, can you use this ingenuity for your schoolwork?
Exactly. I know. Yes. Yeah. So that's difficult to do, but but it's awareness.
It is. And it is easier to do when it's authentic. So if you've had those conversations and reached an agreement, then it's not hard. You don't have to pretend. The hardest part is when you've compromised on something in your marriage early on. You said, hey, we don't align on this. We're going to make a decision one way or the other. And it's a decision that goes against your initial feeling. Like for us, it was money. I was a financial management resource analyst in the Marine Corps.
Yes.
But my personal spending habits and personal financial management weren't as good as they were professionally. My wife, on the other hand, is brilliant with them. And so when we got married, we had to make the decision that she was going to manage the money. And it's very, very hard for me to let go. But sticking with that and accepting that, that's the deal you've made and that's where you're at, I think is important. I think that's where most conflicts in marriage come up, is one person lets go, but they don't completely take their toe out of the water. And they start to take issue with the thing that they were supposed to let go or compromise on. And that's not productive.
Yes.
Yeah. But for me, it's wonderful now.
Good.
Yeah, I got a call like a year ago from one of the company that I work for, and my boss gave me a raise, and I said, this might be a stupid question, but how much money do I make? Because I don't even look anymore.
Oh, so you really released the reins.
Really released it, and it dividends. She's so good with it, and it's not a stress in my life because I trust her to handle it, and I don't even think about it, and it's wonderful.
And it's you recognizing your strengths and Justina's strengths, and then letting that become more aligned too, instead of focusing on your weaknesses and hoping they get better. So,
right.
Yeah. So from a parental perspective, then again, raising kids and one almost daughter teenager, and then a son who's in full teenage mode. What are some things that are things that really work for you? Some tricks, or not tricks, but things that have really worked for you as a parent?
I think early on in our marriage, we read some book about the 5 love languages. And I think recognizing that those extend outside of romantic relationships has been huge, because my children receive love in very, very different ways. So understanding what makes your child feel good about themselves and rewards them in a positive way goes a very, very, very long way, and making them feel loved and accepted and safe in their home and safe in your love for them. Because when they feel insecure about whether or not you're proud of them, or whether or not you love them, or whether or not you have a favorite, that bleeds over into their behavior and their relationships and their performance in school. And
I would agree.
On the flip side, when you do have to step in and like do a punishment or intervene in some kind of a negative way. Again, also understanding what works for each kid is different because everybody responds to things differently. And you might be wasting your time punishing one kid in one way and the other in the same because they're two different people.
Yes.
You have to let them be who they are and meet them where they're at and just make them confident in the fact that you're going to show up.
Yes. What a crash course that must have been for you, because you've only been living under the same roof, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, with your son since he was 12 and your daughter since she was 4.
Yeah.
And so how did you didn't have all those informative years to build that. So how did you get to this point as quickly as you have?
I think like a lot of things that have happened in my life, just drinking from the fire hose and being thrown into head first, has really worked out. Trying to hang on to one part of yourself or one part of your life and then kind of dabble in the next tends to not work out very well. So I think in a lot of ways I was blessed to just be thrown into parenthood with children that could walk and talk and let me know how they feel was awesome, because I didn't have just one child, and it wasn't a baby that, didn't talk to me. It was 2 fully formed, healthy, talkative kids that gave me immediate feedback on what was working and what didn't.
Boy, that must have been, and probably continues to be, a really growing experience.
Yeah.
For everybody, I would imagine.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that stands out was when we used to live in a house around the corner, and I had just I had a lot of career changes all at once. And so I had just gotten into real estate and joined the Air National Guard at the same time that we got the kids, and we had just moved into that house. And so there was a lot going on, and I was working very, very hard, and I'd never had kids before, and I didn't know.
Right. My goodness. So all of a sudden there's this whole nother dynamic that demands your attention.
Yeah. And I just remember sitting in my office one day and my wife asking the kids to go get me for dinner. And then I heard one of the kids say, "Why does it matter? He's just going to say he's working anyway." And it crushed me.
Boy.
And I didn't know they felt that way, especially that early on. I didn't know they were that attached to me, that they even cared that much. I was disappointing them by trying to juggle work while they were home. And so from that point forward, I had to make changes about carving out family time for family, work time for work, and not letting the two bleed over as much as possible.
Yes. And how do you do that? Especially when we're being pulled in so many directions. Do you have any thoughts around that to help other people?
For me, the phone is huge. It takes a little bit of setup at the beginning to really dial in those focus modes. I have an iPhone, and you can set rules for which apps and which contacts notify you in what way, in which focus mode you're in, and giving that some real thought and setting that up, and then just being conscious of the fact that, hey, we're going somewhere as a family right now, or we're going to dinner, we're sitting down for dinner, or we're watching a movie. If my phone rings, it better be an emergency, and if not, it can wait 2 hours.
Okay. And so you do that with every app? We always get those notifications. Do you want them on or off?
Yeah.
And what do you do in that situation?
So most phones, they ship with just like a do not disturb and maybe a sleep mode. And those are kind of binary on or off. But, I would like to know if my wife calls or if my mom calls, stuff like that. And so I basically default to don't bother me on everything, and then I allow the exceptions back in rather than trying to turn off the nuisances. I just turn it all off and allow the very few exceptions to come back in.
And do you turn it all off in those 2 hours that you're spending with family, or is this consistently across the board?
Definitely with the family, and then anything where I don't want a distraction. So if I've carved out time to do focused work, it's on. And if I'm flying a plane, it's absolutely on.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. But then, other times, if it's just me and I'm alone and having downtime, I'll turn it on so that clients can text me and I'll get it right away and I'll be fast to respond and stuff like that. And then during that family time, it's natural to want to check your phone and see those things. And so I just try to stack that on those moments that you would spend away anyway. So using the restroom, getting up to get a drink, it's okay to just, stand up, see it and say, okay, cool. No emergencies have happened. I'll put it back away, but not pulling it out in front of them while they're talking to you or watching a movie with you. It goes a long way.
Okay. And how do your kids, or one or both of them, have access to devices?
They do. So that was, my son came with the phone at 12. Yes. He had actually purchased it for him when he was 10 or 11 because he was visiting and we were sending him back to his circumstances before, and we wanted to just know that he was okay and contact him. The problem is when you give them a device, the world has access to them unless you can kind of control that. And so the levels of control on the two different devices are very different. We made the mistake of not locking down my son as much as we should have at the beginning. And then, as things have come up, we've had to either put more rules in certain areas or release them in others, and be honest with him about why we're doing that. That goes really a long way, because if you treat a teenager like they're an 8-year-old, they're not going to respond well. But if you just tell them, hey, I'm only with you 2 hours a day and the world has access to you the other 22. And I have to control those influences somehow, or at least try to tip the scales in balance of positive influences.
Yes.
They understand and they get it. And then the little one, it's basically completely locked down with, hey, the exceptions of, hey, you can call grandma and mom and us, or you can call your friend in Texas, stuff like that. Yeah. But for her, there's no YouTube on the tablet, or I'm going to watch TV on the iPad instead of the TV, none of that. And it also keeps it really effective for when you need them to be quiet. So like for her, because she's not used to having TV on the iPad, when we go on a 10-hour road trip and we give her TV on the iPad, she's silent for 10 hours.
So it's more of the exception than the rule.
Yes.
So knowing what you know now, Sam, what would you do the same? And what would you do differently? And in the first thing that comes to your mind, whether it's parenting, whether it's relationship or career, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think the things I would do the same are maintaining an open and honest relationship with the kids. That was something, if I had to pat myself on the back, I think we did really well from the beginning. We didn't just bring them in and pretend that we had been their parents their whole life. We, especially with the older one, recognized the fact that this is a little bit weird and probably awkward for you and us. Yeah. Let them come to you in their own way. And then things I would do differently. I think, obviously, I talked about balancing work and family better at the beginning. Yes. But you've asked a lot of questions about technology. And I think one of the things that I did way too late with the technology, and it happened as a byproduct of us moving to Texas and coming back. I left the Wi-Fi equipment in place at our house in Arizona, and then I bought new Wi-Fi equipment in Texas. And then when we moved back to Arizona, we had some issues managing the kids' technology. So what I did was I just set up both Wi-Fi networks. One is for kids, one is for grown-ups. And the one for kids is locked down at the network level to only the things that you want them to have access to.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you're not trying to set parental controls on every single device that they own. You're just setting them at the network level. Because it's a headache for them too. There's a lot of stuff that they would try to access that I have no problem with them accessing. That device would block because, maybe they were in trouble last month and we locked down that device and they didn't play with it for like a month, and now they want to use it and it's locked down, and they think that that's just the rule, and they're being respectful and not bugging me about it. And then I find out that I blocked something that I didn't even want blocked, and they're just being nice and not telling me. And it's like, it's easier if I just have a button on my phone that controls stuff. And
that
works better.
Well, And when you do it that way, it's sort of the network is the blocker, but you're not. It takes the conflict out of the relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yes. So it's more of a technical thing than a parental thing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems, because that's when I talk with parents, there just seems to be more conflict in relationships because the kids are wanting the devices and the parents want to put parameters around it. So it's sort of a continual part of the family dynamic.
It absolutely is. And it's,
yeah.
I think a lot of times we do a bad job of communicating to our children why we're putting the guardrails up.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, kids understandably get mad. They go, hey, especially in their teenage years, I'm growing up, I'm becoming an adult, I'm doing all these adult things, and you want to control me or lock this down or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then the conflict comes.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we do a better job of explaining why it's there.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't want you to have fun. It's that, I want to make sure that you are, getting influences from whatever the family's religion may be, or influences from, productive authors, speakers, YouTube channels, shows. It's the one app, the one platform. It can be used for good or bad, and it can influence in a positive or negative way.
Yes.
And I just tell my kids all the time, it's my job to make sure that you grow up to be a good person and that you have the skills you need to get what you want in life. And, we're going to serve that end this way or that way. And they, for the most part, get it. They're usually not unhappy about it because we're not coming from a standpoint of conflict. We're coming from, hey, I'm trying to help you in the long run, and this is why I feel what I feel.
Mm-hmm. Do
you agree? Do you not agree? How can they compromise?
Well, I think that provides huge insight for other parents because you became an unsuspecting parent, you probably parent differently. And you probably have been forced into that situation where you have to collaborate more with your children and ask for their opinion rather than be in that telling mode, right? Which I can say, I fell into as a parent often.
We've all been there.
So that's a great insight, though. That's you sort of bring your kids because of the stage you wonderfully received them. You're forced into that to be more collaborative.
Yeah, and I think having the age difference has forced us into that because easy to get into the telling mode with the younger one because she is at an age that would be normal for my wife and I to have had a child. But my wife is 28 and my son is 16. So that's not a normal age gap there. And so if she has a friend that's maybe 24, they are not far apart in age at all. Like my best friend in the Air Force, I think he's just turned 25 and he was like 24 for most of it. And I think 23 at the beginning of pilot training.
Yeah.
And so having a 23-year-old guy around when your son is 15, 16, that's not a big age gap.
Not a big gap.
And so he's not that dissimilar in his interests or his demeanor or the things that he likes to watch.
Yes.
And so we get checked a lot on how we parent because you can't tell somebody who's that close in age to you the same way that you would tell a 4-year-old what to do. And then when you have them both, you can't treat one differently than the other because then it becomes not fair. So I have to be more collective with the little one than I otherwise might be if I didn't have the older one.
Wow. So you're not only getting checked by your kids, but your friends are checking you.
Yeah. It's just
what a unique situation. Yeah. Well, may I ask you, thank you very much for being so real and candid. May I ask you some questions from my board game now you're talking?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's get into it.
I'm looking forward to it. What's a small decision that you made, Sam, that had a very big impact?
Man, small decision that had a big impact in my life or in my parenting?
Whatever first comes to you. I mean, all our lives are a series of little decisions, but some of them pack a punch.
They do. I think it felt small at the time, but I had aspirations and plans at the end of my time in the Marine Corps to move back to the States because I was stationed in Japan. I was going to move back to the States, and I had this career lined up in the Air Force in a different arena than being a pilot. And I was going to leave a little bit early off of that contract to enter the other one. And I met my wife, and we had only been dating for about 4 or 5 weeks at the time, if that, maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And
my goodness.
And I just made the decision to pull the paperwork, and I didn't tell her. I pulled the paperwork and I said, hey, I'm going to stay in Japan, for the next 6 months and see where this goes.
Boy.
And it felt small at the time because it was just an email and I wasn't moving. I just made the decision to continue living my life where I was doing what I was doing and just see where things went with this person. And that shaped the entire rest of my life.
What an example that is. And thank goodness we don't know what are small decisions and big decisions, really, because it might paralyze us to make any decision at all. So that's a great example.
It would paralyze me. I knew.
Exactly. Because you have imagined in that moment that you'd be where you are now. Yeah. It's such a monumental leap where you are. How many years ago was that?
That was 7.5 years ago.
Not a lot of time. Boy, wow. What is the next big step, Sam, that you will take towards achieving a big goal?
These are great questions.
Thank you.
I think the next big step for me is going to be doubling down on the photography business.
Interesting.
Yeah. I've had a lot of interest throughout my life, and I've started companies in the past, and I do have these moments where I look back, maybe I'll find a sweatshirt that had a company logo on it, or I'll find a website or an old Instagram post and I'll think about the potential that could have existed with that business if I had just stuck with it longer. And I don't have any regrets because life has turned out better than I could have ever imagined. And I've achieved things that are the most important to me. But I think I've reached a spot now where I've accomplished the big goals. I've, gotten to a good spot in my marriage. We've got 3 homes now, and I love the one that we're in. I don't want to move. Our kids are older, and on a personal level, my lifelong goal was always to be a pilot, and it was a journey getting here. But I finally am at the accomplishment, the inflection point in that where I've made it happen and I get paid to do it now. And I have such a unique opportunity where it balances well with life. And so now there's excuse to abandon a business. And I've chosen a business that fits really well with not just my personal life, but with our larger goals, which would be to employ other people to do something positive that makes a difference. You're not just peddling random goods or things that don't benefit people.
Yes.
And if it pans out the way that I would like it to, it could fund other things that we have. Like my wife and I, she's a pilot as well. And we both struggled so much to achieve our goal because we don't come from families with money and we don't come from families in aviation. And it's a very, very locked off.
Yet you've achieved it, and your son is also going down that road too.
Yeah, he is. And he's a big example of what happens when the parents are in aviation. It opens the door for the kid. But what we would like to do is fund a nonprofit that allows veterans to get their private pilot's license, which is, roughly $12,000 that they don't have most of the time when they leave service. But it's a requirement if they want to go to college for aviation and use their GI Bill. They have to have funded that $12,000 up front to be eligible for the education benefits. So we would like to run a nonprofit that funds veterans going through their private licenses. And so if I can build a vessel or a tool to help my family and to leave a lasting impact and to help others, that would be the biggest blessing of all. So I think that's the next big step.
And so how does photography connect with that then, Sam?
Yeah. So photography is interesting. It's a hobby I've always had. And
As a kid too?
Yeah.
As a kid? Oh, fantastic. I always love those kids stories that weave throughout our lives.
Yeah. My grandma was always really into it. Her email was photosaRme@Hotmail, and she would always force the family into these photos, and we'd all groan and stand in front of them. And she always had a camera. And then my great grandfather he served in World War II. And I was always fascinated with him and his stuff. And when he passed, I got his camera, and it sits on my shelf. And I've just always been super fascinated by it. And I remember buying my first real camera in Japan, and then riding my bike around and taking pictures of everything I could find, and then slowly buying more and more equipment and taking different types of pictures and doing videos and stuff. And then when I became a real estate agent, I loved taking listing photos, and I found the product that was coming out of me and my camera better than the professional photographers that I was hiring. And I thought, okay, maybe I've gotten good at this over the last decade, better than I thought. Then when I got picked up by the Air Force to go fly, it became very apparent that it would be hard to manage clients full-time as an agent while being away all the time. Whereas photography is a very low time commitment in person. That is, it only takes me 30 minutes to shoot the house physically there, and then everything else is done away. And it's a skill that I can teach other people. I've got processes and a checklist down and equipment down. And so it's, from a business standpoint, you go, okay, this is repeatable and scalable, and the profit margin is high. And it's something that I find interesting and worthwhile, because a home is somebody's biggest asset. It is very important to emotionally. Yeah. And so if you can do the homeowner a service by showing their home in the best light and getting them money for it when they sell it, and then also helping the agent move their listing faster, earn a higher commission, negotiate better, there's no loser in the equation when it comes to the professional home photos. And once you learn how to do it, it's a very different type of photography, but it is easier to teach than it is to teach photographing a person or a moving object like a plane or a car. So I thought, okay, it's scalable, it's repeatable, it's worthwhile, the profit margin is high, and therefore, I could scale this up to have other employees, then I could become the manager of the business, and then we could use the proceeds from the business to fund other worthwhile ventures. So that's the connection. Yeah. So it's interesting to me when you talk, it's in your blood. When you talked about your grandfather, your grandmother, and then your great grandfather. Yes. So it's interesting. So it's part of your lineage. Yeah. And perhaps your legacy. So back to the question, what's the next step that you will take towards achieving this goal? It is a step that I really don't like taking, but it's one that I've started in the last few weeks, and that is the cold texting and emailing and calling, because you come to the realization when you own a business that you can't just sit there and wait for it to happen. If you want to scale it beyond yourself, it becomes especially important not to just base the business on referrals and repeat customers. You have to get new clients. You have to book beyond yourself to book somebody else. And so it has been a couple of weeks of constant heartache as you send text message after text message after text message to stranger after stranger after stranger, and get no reply, get a please stop texting me reply, get the can kicked down the road. And it's awful, but it's important, and it's been the biggest step. But got a new phone number just for that purpose, targeting the area codes that we want to target, invested in a CRM and investing in lead lists and stuff like that. It's been a big financial investment and then a time investment as well. But honestly, the hardest part has been checking my pride and my ego and handling the rejection, because it actually makes everything else in life more stressful too. If you have to go into a hard parenting situation or a hard flight and you've had a bunch of rejection that morning, it just makes it feel worse. So it's been a good growth point for me, and I think it'll continue to be, but I hope it'll pay off in the long run.
Your lesson was you could only eat an elephant one bite at a time. So really, what you're saying to me is exactly that. What are some words of wisdom that you can leave, please?
I would say,
and share.
For whatever it's worth, keep your word to your children and to your spouse. Show up consistently to all the rainy games or the faraway practices, the things that you would expect your parents to be there for. You need to be there as well. Keep your word, be honest, set the example. Let me pick a different one. And then we go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back on the next path. And we always find ourselves just not where we want to be. Sometimes you have to stay on one path and go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So with kids, with career, I found that just sticking to it and showing up and taking it one bite at a time has been the only thing that works for me anyway.
Well, what a great conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time and for sharing your...
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I can't wait for the board game to come out. Those questions were really, really good and really loaded.
Thank you very much. Well, yeah. we'll I'll let you know when it happens. Thanks, Sam. This conversation with Sam is a powerful reminder that resilience isn't built in big, dramatic moments. It's built one decision, one conversation, and one day at a time. Whether it's how we show up with our kids, how we handle technology in our homes, or how we balance ambition with presence, Sam brings us back to what matters most: being intentional, staying connected, and leading by example. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on one small shift you can make at home, at work, or in how you communicate with people you care about most. And if you found this conversation meaningful, please share it with another parent, leader, or family who might need it right now. Thanks for being here and for choosing conversations that help us live, parent, and lead with more clarity and connection. You've been listening to Now You're Talking. Parenting with a busy career while guiding kids through the lure of screens isn't easy, but meaningful connection is always worth it. Take a moment to start a conversation with someone you care about. It could be the highlight of their day. Until next time, let the conversations begin. Now You're Talking.
I'm Michelle Abraham, and we are honored to have Adrienne Giffen's Now You're Talking podcast on our High Vibe Podcast Network. For more High Vibe shows like hers, head on over to highvibepodcastnetwork.com and grab your free gift from our gift vault from all of our hosts. Until then, stay high vibe.